me out tonight. My name is Bex. I am the events coordinator here at Books Are Magic, and we are so excited to have Laura Pegram, Naima, and Nicole Dennis-Benn here with us tonight to celebrate Sing the Truth. A few housekeeping notes to go over before we get started. We'll be doing a hand raise Q&A at the end of the night. Think of your questions, hold them tight. We will get them answered. Afterwards, Laura will be signing and personalizing books near where you checked in. We will let you know when and where to line up for that. If you're joining us virtually in the live stream, we'd love to encourage you to buy a copy of Sing the Truth online using the link in the description. If you're here and you haven't bought a copy yet, I'm telling you, you should buy a copy. You really need to order more. You can order more until you take them off our hands. Speaking of, Sing the Truth is a powerful must-read collection of bold BIPOC voices. All proceeds support the Quayle Journal's mission to nurture emerging writers of color and foster a vibrant literary community, featuring works from acclaimed authors Naima and Nicole Dennis-Benn, amongst others. This anthology stands as a testament to voices too often overlooked in contemporary literature. A bit about Quayle. The word means truth in Swahili. Under the direction of founding editor Laura Pegram, since 2009, it has been their mission to nurture emerging BIPOC writers that sing the truth. With a quarterly online literary journal, year-long writer fellowships, multi-session workshops, writing retreats, individualized editing, an annual writers conference, and international festival, Quayle invests in the artistic and professional growth of emerging authors nationally and internationally. Okay, start of tonight's show. Laura Pegram, Quayle's founder, is a multidisciplinary artist. She has worked as a development associate at Scholastic Productions and as an instructor at the Frederick Douglass Creative Arts Center and as an acting director/instructor at the John Oliver Killen's Young Writers Program. She received the 2020 CBC Diversity Outstanding Achievement Award. Conversation partner extraordinaires, Naima is the New York Times bestselling author of What's Mine Is Yours, which we also have tonight here for you to purchase, and was a 2020 National Book Foundation's 5 Under 35 honoree. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, Quayle, the Paris Review Daily. Going too fast, I'm sorry. There's like no reason to be doing this. Catapult, The Rumpus, and elsewhere. She holds an MFA in creative writing from Columbia, as well as degrees from Fordham and Yale. She has taught writing for over a decade in community settings, youth programs, and universities. She lives here in Brooklyn with her family. Other conversation extraordinaire, Nicole Dennis-Benn is the author of Here Comes the Sun, which we also have here tonight for you to purchase. Nope, sorry, Patsy. We've got Patsy for you to purchase tonight, which is more recent, and therefore you haven't read it yet, maybe? It's so good, you should read it. All of them, they're so good. Okay. Patsy was a 2020 Lambda Literary Award winner and a New York Times Editor's Choice, Financial Times Critics' Choice, and Stonewall Book Awards Honor Book, and a Today Show Read with Jenna Book Club selection. Born and raised in Kingston, Jamaica, Nicole teaches at Princeton and is the founder of the Stuyvesant Writing Workshop. She lives with her wife and 2 sons, also here in Brooklyn. Without any further ado, please join me in an enormous welcome to these lovely writers.
Okay, let's go. You ready? Ready. All right. I thought we'd start and open up with a quote by one of the artists that we each like, as we stand aside. During Quayle Lit Fest last year, Edwige told the audience that every word I put down on the page is an act of both witness and love. Can you speak to your short stories in terms of witness and love, and then share a brief excerpt from your story? Who would like to start with that?
I'll start. Can we just give it up for Laura? She's done so much for so many of us, and we have this beautiful book as a testament to some of the great work that you've done. So my story in this anthology is a story called Cold, which after I published it in Quayle, people kept saying to me, that should be a novel, like that could be a novel. And it became a novel. It became my second novel, What's Mine and Yours. My editor for that book is here, Seema Mahanian. And the book that grew out of this story is really about what happens when your dreams for your life are destroyed or lost, and you have to find a way to keep on living. And what you're able to do as you press on, but also what can never be recovered. And those are the themes in the short story about a woman named Lacey May, whose husband has gone away, who's imprisoned, and she doesn't have a vision for her life that goes beyond him and her role as wife and mother, and has to reconstitute her life, and also has to solve the practical problem of keeping the heat on in her house for her 3 little girls. And the story, I think I wanted to bear witness to that loneliness that she feels, and that loneliness that comes with feeling without help, and being alone. So that's what I was trying to bear witness to and hold in the story. And I think that in writing the story, I came to love her. She became difficult and less lovable in the novel as I developed her, but in Cold, I really loved her, and felt aware of her loves and her vulnerabilities, which I think makes fiction exciting. So I'll read a little bit just from the very beginning of Cold.
Thank you.
All right. The cold is a thing any woman can grow accustomed to. Lacey May learned how in precisely 3 days, which was quicker than anyone who knew her would have ever expected. It was a Wednesday, newly November, and she was raking the leaves in the front yard when it occurred to her to check the gas tank. Her knuckles were red and sore from the few minutes she'd been outside, and it wouldn't be long before the night started to dip toward the 30s. The tank was shaped like a tiny submarine, and it stood in the shadow of a house. She pulled up the metal lid and saw the needle on the gauge pointing down to 15%. Lacey ran inside, still holding the rake, and she dropped the heat down as low as she could stand. She passed the rest of the day in her good coat, the one Robbie brought her the winter she was pregnant with their first. It was big on her now, but she was more or less fine with it on. She kept the kettle boiling because the steam felt good rising on her face while she stood at the stove, and if she drank cup after cup of coffee, she could keep her hands warm too. By noon, she was shaking from all the caffeine, her fingernails tinged with blue. She wanted Robbie to call so she could tell him about the tank and ask how long 15% would last, but he didn't. She called the agency instead to ask again if they'd found anything for her yet. It's kind of hard when you haven't worked in 10 years and all you've ever done is fry fries. The receptionist spoke slowly, as if she didn't expect Lacey to understand. I've been raising my girls, Lacey said. I mean real work, out of the house, employment. I'm pretty sure I could answer the phone. You don't have any qualifications. Lacey wanted to hang up on her or to insult her again, but the receptionist didn't seem interested in a fight. Besides, she couldn't risk ticking off the woman who could decide whether to move her folder, bless you, down to the bottom of the pile. So Lacey mentioned how she'd earned decent grades in high school, was quick in the kitchen, better behind the wheel than most. You can write that down if you want, she said, and the receptionist was quiet for a long while. Finally, she said she would add a note to Lacey's file and give her a call if anything opened up. Lacey thanked the woman for her time and got off the phone. Later on, when she heard the school bus turn up the road, Lacey climbed into the crawl space and hauled down the old duffel bag filled with the children's winter clothes. She waited at the door for them, her arms loaded down with woolen things that smelled of dust and damp from months spent shut up in the dark. The girls blazed in, chattering, their cheeks wind-blown, and Lacey handed them each an extra sweater and a pair of mittens, a scarf for Margarita. It's winter in our house, she said, and the girls caught on quickly. They dropped their school bags and swathed themselves in the new layers, made a big noise stomping around the living room. Soon they were all explorers, sliding across a stretch of ice in Alaska. Somehow Lacey became a sled, and the girls scrambled on top of her, and although she couldn't move, it made them laugh. Diane pretended to be a dog, one of those racing wolf dogs, so she got down on all fours and howled, which made the real dog Jenkins dart behind the couch to hide. They kept on their sweaters and scarves while they cooked grilled cheese, the yellow squares gobbled up by their hands faster than Lacey could set them in the pan. They were pleased when they were all allowed to lie down in bed with Lacey, and she didn't make them crawl out from under the blankets to wash their greasy fingers or their unbrushed teeth. Jenkins dozed beneath them on the floor as if he couldn't feel the cold at all, and the girls watched their breath puff overhead. That's oxygen, Lacey said. It's what we breathe. You spell it O-X-Y. Her oldest, Noelle, liked to look at picture books about the ocean and outer space. In the summer, she tended to the tomato plants in the yard and caught dragonflies and burned their wings off under her magnifying glass. She could be a scientist one day if she started her extra learning now. Lacey was spelling for her. Noelle looked a lot older than almost 10, the little swipes of purple under her eyes, a reminder that no matter how fine they all seemed, the girls missed their daddy. She repeated after Lacey, a blanket tucked under her chin and her face serious, as if she knew how much every letter was worth. G-E-N. Diane and Margarita gave a little round of applause when their sister got it right. The next morning, the girls went off to school, all of them with pink noses and runny eyes. Lacey saw them down the hill, and she was jealous of their little black heads disappearing into the bus. They were off to somewhere the thermostat was set much higher than 55.
All right. That was really good, Naima.
Thank you.
Yes. All right. So wow, where do I start? So this short story was actually my very first short story, and sort of like Naima was told, this is a novel. Laura took the chance with me. I was not published anywhere, and I sent this off to Quayle, and I was surprised when she said, "Oh, I love this so much," and that was my first boost of confidence, like literally. Having someone who's not my wife, who's not my mother, saying, love my work. And so I sat with this book, literally, and the fact that Laura had become that mentor, that person who pushed me to turn this into a real novel. And then I ended up meeting an agent, Julie Barr, who believed in this book, and then Katie from Live Right at the time, who just when she got her hands on it, it was just history. So this is What's for Sale, and it's what you now know as Here Comes the Sun, my first novel. And so the question you asked was, what was it like?
I wanted you to
Witness.
speak in terms of witness and love.
Witness and love.
Yeah.
So Here Comes the Sun was actually a love letter to Jamaica. I wanted to tap into, it was written about the tourism industry. It followed 3 women who were trying to come to terms with their hometown being, taken over by the hotel resorts, which happens all the time. And growing up in Jamaica, this was happening. We couldn't use our beaches, but then our island is sold to the world as paradise. And so as a writer, I turned the pen inwards. What is paradise? Who owns paradise? And this book, I was hoping would answer that question. But in addition to that, wanting it to still be a love letter to my people, wanting Jamaicans to still read it, hear themselves, see themselves on the page, feel empowered that we have a story as well. We have a story too. We are not only the grinning locals, but we have lives, we have interiority. And so Here Comes the Sun was that for me, in terms of that witness and also the love relationship, that love, and that love produced this book. So this is a What's for Sale, which is an excerpt. This is Dolores. At Old Fort Craft Park, Dolores links hands with the flush-faced men in floral shirts who are too polite to decline, and the women in broad straw hats whose thin lips fix in frightened smiles. Before the tourists pass Dolores' stall, she listens to the prices. The other higglers quote them, prices that makes the tourists politely decline and walk away. So by the time they get to Dolores, the last stall in the market, she's ready. She pounces, just like she does at Falmouth Market on Tuesdays, as soon as the ship docks. But the tourists hesitate, as they always do, probably startled by the big black woman with bulging eyes and flared nostrils. Her current victims are middle-aged people, a middle-aged couple. May have enough nice things for you and your husband. Sorry, I haven't read this in years. Bear with me. Come this way, sweetie pie. Dolores pulls the woman's hand gently. The man follows behind his wife. both hands clutching the big camera around his neck, as if he's afraid someone will steal it. To set them at ease, Dolores confides in them. "Oh, Lord a mercy," she says, fanning herself with an old Jamaica observer. "This rotted heat is no joke. You know, I've been standing in it all day. Why, things hard." She wipes the sweat that pours down her face, one eye on them. It's more nervousness than the heat, because things are slow and Dolores needs the money. She observes the woman scrutinizing the jewelry, the drop earrings made of wood, the beaded necklaces, anklets, and bracelets. The only things in the stall that Dolores makes. "That one would be nice with your dress," Dolores says when the woman picks up a necklace. But the woman only responds with a stiff smile, gently putting down the item, then moving on to the next. Dolores continues to fan. Normally the Americans are chatty, gullible. Dolores never usually has to work so hard with them, for their politeness makes them benevolent, apologetic to a fault. But this couple must be a different breed. Maybe Dolores is wrong. Maybe they're from somewhere else. But only the American tourists dress like they're going on a safari, especially the men, with their clogs, khaki apparel, and binocular-looking cameras. "Hot flash and this ungodly heat no agree at all," Dolores says, when the woman moves to the wooden baskets. Only then the woman smiles, a genuine smile that indicates her understanding, the recognition of a universal feminine condition. Only then does she finger her foreign bills, as though unwilling to part with them. "How much are the necklaces?" she asks Dolores in an American accent. She's pointing at one of the red, green, and yellow pendants made from glass beads. Dolores had taken her time to string them. "25, Dolores says. "Sorry, that's too much," the woman says. She glances at her husband. "Isn't 25 a bit much for this, Harry?" She holds up the necklace like it's a piece of string and dangles it in front of her husband. The man touches the necklace like he's some kind of necklace expert. We're not paying more than 5 for this," he says in a voice of authority that reminds Dolores of Reverend Cleve Grant, whose booming voice can be heard every noon offering a prayer for the nation on Radio Jamaica. "It take time for make, sir," Dolores says. "I can go down to 20. 15. "All right, we'll get to you for 15, Dolores says, suppressing her disappointment. As she counts the change to give back to the woman, she catches her eyeing the miniature Jamaican dolls. Surely it must remind her of the types of people on the island whom she'd only get a chance to see in a day. The people her husband captures with a camera slung around his neck, snapping pictures every so often at something he and his wife can marvel at later with their friends. He too surveys the table of the Rastas with long oversized penises, the smiling women with tar black faces and baskets of fruits on their heads, the grinning farmer carrying green bananas in his hands, the t-shirts with weed, plants, and a smoking Bob Marley with Irie written in bold letters, the ragdolls wearing festival dresses that look like picnic tablecloths. If you buy 3 items, you get a discounted price. All these things are quality. Seizing the opportunity. You wouldn't get them anywhere else but right here, so. The man takes out his wallet and Dolores' hearts leap in her throat. Give me 2 of those in large, the tank in a small. He points at the t-shirts. Once he makes his purchase, his wife, as though given permission to grab as many local souvenirs as possible, purchases a woven basket for my mom. More bracelets with Rasta colors for Alan and Miranda, and a couple of the rag dolls decked in festival dresses for their girls. By the time they were done, they bought half of what Dolores had. Only Dolores can sell these souvenirs in a day, because unlike the other Iglas, she knows she has a gold mine at home. a daughter she has to support, one who is going to be a doctor. She does it for her, Tandy. All the foreign dollars she stuffs inside her brassiere will be saved inside the old mattress on the bed that she shares with her mother. I'll stop there.
Come on down. We'll start as soon as you get settled. Welcome, everyone. Thank you both for your reading. It made me remember why I fell in love with your pieces. And I can't begin to tell you, thank you for trusting me with your art. Thank you. Oh my gosh. Okay, so why don't we start with a few craft questions? I thought we could begin with character. Since you introduced us to Lacey, May, and Dolores, I thought we could speak about complex characterization and look at a quote from Britt Bennett, who joined us for our festival in 2020. And everything shut down. And she was asked about the approach to creating complex characters on the page. She said, I'm always thinking, what is a thing that a character would never admit to somebody else? She said, that's a good question that I always try to ask myself because the book dropped. And it's a good way to get at something really secret and essential about that character. Just what is that thing? So what would you say Lacey, May, and Dolores would never admit to a soul? Top secret.
Yeah, all right,
Not
sure.
going nowhere.
I did that to you the first time, so I'll take the bait. Okay, what would Dolores not tell her soul? So Dolores, I feel like she would not reveal her vulnerabilities. I feel like Dolores came off as a hard woman. I loved her too, and Naima talked about loving Lacey May until you hated her. I love Dolores. And I tell my students this all the time. You gotta love your characters to create them and to be led by them. And I really love Dolores. But when you really look inside Dolores, there are so many things that Dolores did not get right. The world may receive Dolores as a bad parent, given what she did to her daughter. If you had not read Here Comes the Sun, I don't want to give too much away. Okay, right? But you know, Dolores did something horrible, some horrible things. And you might say, oh my gosh, who's this woman? But the thing is that I always say, you know, you mother how you were mothered. And that's for some people, because some people mindfully say, I won't be my mother. And that it worked out fine for them. But for Dolores, she was mothered in that way. And for her, she thought she was being the best mother ever by telling her daughters, the world won't give you a pedestal as black women. You know, you have to grow up fast. You have to be able to tell yourselves, like, you have to be able to, the world won't tell you that you're great, you know, so let me be the first to teach you. Let me be the first to cut you down before the big wide world do it. And for her, that's love. That's how she internalized love.
I'm preparing you.
I'm preparing you, right? And that's how she saw it. Dolores did not have a therapist. So she was doing her very best. But her vulnerabilities, her truths, what Dolores would never share with the world is that I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm only doing this because I was taught to do this. You know, and so for her, it's that's the thing that she shields from the world. And she shields from her daughters as well. And so she's basically just operating on that. And yes, it ends up not serving her or her daughters, but at the same time, you know, like she was just sailing on, okay, this is how I survive. And for Dolores, it was mainly about survival for her. And she knew how to survive the best way she knew how. And yeah, that was one thing that she holds dear. And, you know, right now, even if she's on her deathbed, she'd say, I did my best. You know, and clutching to her chest would be that secret. I had no idea, but I tried. I don't know if that answered your question, but that was really where I was coming from, especially developing that character or having the character lead me, because I started that character, but I feel like she led me through her journey in that regard.
Thank you. Same question for you.
Yeah, similarly, I think Lacey May would also not give up her vulnerability, and for her, I think it would be her feelings of inadequacy or feelings of being small. Like, the quest of the story is getting money to get the gas, to keep the gas on, to turn it up, and also to find a job. So throughout the story, she's sort of like saying to herself, like, I can do this. Like, I did well in my science classes. Like, when I had this job in high school, they told me I had a good manner. Like, she's building a case to herself for how employable she is and how capable she is. But underneath that are deep feelings of inadequacy. Like, she is a woman who has really searched for worth in her husband and Robbie, who's gone. And that's been sort of how she's understood herself as someone who's special and important, and then that falls apart. And so her story is one of survival, but I don't think Lacey ever really gets to a place, unfortunately, of not feeling quite so small. That's not her journey, but beyond the scope of the story in Lacey May's life, you see how that feeling that's never articulated to herself or to others really like sours her relationships with her daughters, and ultimately leads her to oppose a school busing initiative, because she wants to hoard opportunity for her girls who are already in the school, and not share. She doesn't want other people to have their due, because she's someone who's already worried about having less because she feels less than. And I didn't know all that when I wrote this story, but it was fun to write a story about somebody who's working hard to overcome those feelings, even if she won't articulate them, and ends up ensuring the survival of her girls in some ways, but it costs her to never go to therapy, to never do sort of like that internal work. Like, she's so focused on survival. That's what she's able to provide.
Thank you. Now, how did both of you approach creating this complex character on the page? Was the first image that appeared, or how did you set about like layering that person once they presented themselves?
Yeah. I think a lot about situation when I craft character, like character in part like being innate, like a set of qualities, your history, your body, your memory, but then also like what is happening in this person's life right now that shapes all these things, like shapes what they say, shapes what they choose, shapes their interior. I don't think we are who we are apart from our situations. And for Lacey May, what came to me first was like the situation of being cold. And part of that was because I was living in North Carolina at the time, and I did not know how expensive it was to heat a house with propane. I just didn't know. It's like thousands of dollars. And I was like snowed in. I lived in this little house at the bottom of a gravel road. I'd been in North Carolina for a few months. It was very cold. I was like, this is terrible. What am I going to do over these days? And I was like, I'm going to write a story about a woman who's really cold and who feels alone and can't turn the gas up. And so it was like her situation. And then, she's quite different than me in many ways, but also they're seeds of me in all my characters, even the most unlikely ones. But for her, it was a lot about like situation. How does that form us? What does that drive us to? And how do we transform as our conditions change?
So it's a lot about emotional truth.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's beautiful. And the same thing for me. I approach my characters in that same way. I also think place is a huge character, and I talk about this all the time in terms of understanding character motive. I have to first understand where they are, in terms of the social, cultural, political atmosphere. And like I said before, I'm writing this story. I was writing this story set in Jamaica, set in the 90s, at the time when the tourism industry was developing. And you know, one thing that I wanted to take into consideration was that quest, that survival mentality, where you are a part of this story, like a vendor in the market, a farmer market. Who are you? Who are you as a hotel desk clerk? Who are you as a person who actually sees this as an opportunity to gain upward mobility? And so for me, I wanted to dig deeper in a story where, you know, I often saw a lot of times when you encounter a market vendor, for example, in our culture, it was more like caricature. And so I wanted to give Dolores that power to tell her story, her side of the story. You know, who is a Dolores? And even as tourists, you go to the island and you see these women and men, and you know, they're trying to haggle and they're trying to get their items sold. But what do they have to go home to? And that was how I approached it in developing this character. But that was just a surface, and then getting deeper into that truth. You know, that once again, that vulnerability. Who am I? You know, that first question. Dolores was somebody too that, given her how she grew up, you know, wanting desperately, feeling rejected by society, but wanting very much her youngest daughter Tandy to make it, to be that extension of herself that can actually become somebody who would make her feel proud. For her, that was her only way of saying, I am somebody. And so I wanted to get deep inside of the mentality of a woman like that, you know, who has felt like the bottom of society, to know try her hardest to make sure that her daughter rises to the top. And the complexity, the darkness that comes with that too, like her telling her oldest daughter, you're nothing. I'm gonna dare say it.
No.
Okay, all right. The things that she has to do, the complex things, the hard things that she had to do. As a mother, it was really to support her family in the long run, thinking, oh, this would be the best thing right now. Not really thinking of the long-term effects it would have on her daughter, but knowing right now I need to survive. Right now my family needs to eat, and this is how I'm gonna survive. And so that was how I had to come at it for Dolores. And yes, I did have I fought with Dolores. She was one of those characters who I had a love-hate relationship with. And like you, Naima, there was a time when I could not even look at Dolores. I put Dolores down, but then it was the love that made me pick Dolores back up and say, I understand who you are, speak to me. And seeing Dolores for myself. So that also entails, and we're probably going to talk about this too. I often tell my students, sit in the same shoes as your character, walk around the block as your character, not as you. Even if you live in Brooklyn Heights right here, who is the character you're working on? And just walk in their shoe. It's like a meditation. Just walk in their shoe. Who are they? How are they feeling in their body, right? What are they looking at? What are they focusing on? And I always give them that exercise, and I do it to this day. And that's how I approached Dolores. I had to sit inside Dolores and just walk the world through Dolores' eyes, see the world through Dolores' eyes, see her desperation, see what it takes for this woman to want to survive. And yeah, she ended up alienating her daughters, but at the same time, it was who she is, and she felt to this day that she did right. And so, what it's like to sit with a woman like that, I really had to love her and be able to just be her companion as she tells me that story.
Without judgment.
Without judgment, definitely. Yeah, and it was Toni Morrison. We have a common love for Toni Morrison, right? Who said, you know, our characters need our intelligence, not our judgment. And I abide by that.
Yes. I wonder if we have time for one more question. I know we're supposed to start with audience questions.
I was going to say one more question.
All right. Thank you. to touch on dialogue a little bit. Oops. Because it's something that folks struggle with often. What's your approach to dialogue that sings on the page, that does multiple things at once? From characterizing to providing exposition to advancing the plot. Like, how do you do it all so that that scene really sings?
Ooh, it's a good one.
Yes, it
was. Best class. What do you want to do? This? Me or you?
Whichever.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I want to hear. Like, I want to know if you.
I was joking.
Goodness. Oh, all right. So dialogue. I love dialogue. I feel like not only does it free up the paragraph, for me and characterize, as you say, but you hear people. I write in Jamaican. I write my dialogue with our language. I don't want to say language. I'm sorry to the Jamaicans in here who know it as dialect. No, it's our language, patois. I write in our language, especially conversations between two Jamaicans. Two Jamaicans speaking to each other unobserved would not be talking to each other in the standard Queen's English. Would have some patois sprinkled in there. Even if we were like stush, I went to all the nice high school then, we still would have had something sprinkled in there. So I feel like, no, I want that dialogue to speak to that. And that was why I was so mindful in writing that in all my stories. Here Comes the Sun and Patsy and projects to come, where I wanted dialogue to talk, to speak to us, to Jamaicans to hear themselves. And even if you're not Jamaican, at least slow down a little bit and understand who these people are on the page. And
Beyond what the media.
Right, exactly. Because once again, I mean, not only throwing out quotes. I hate when people throw quotes out there, but somehow I'm throwing out quotes because I feel like my ancestors are here. James Baldwin too had said language is identity, and I feel like if you're going to be writing fiction and you're writing it about a group of people, write true to how they speak. Never mind the readers, never mind who don't understand. Write true to how they speak. Maybe give it a little context, or in a way where people can slow themselves down. But write true to how your characters speak, right? And that's, to me, it resonates more than trying or attempting to just, write the Queen's English.
That was wonderful. It was a masterclass.
Oh gosh.
I think in my approach to dialogue, I think a lot about how people speak to each other, but then also speak like past one another. Not just on the page, but in life. Like when we're talking to each other, we are trying to respond and listen, hopefully, ideally, but we're also like telling on ourselves, like revealing what matters to us, what our fears are, our prejudices, what's happened to us. And so that's sort of like my challenge to myself when I write dialogue. Like, how can I have these people actually talking to each other, whether it's a pair or like a bigger ensemble, but also be talking about the thing that they can't stop talking about, even if it's not what's being discussed, like how can your deepest desires and fears like show up all the time, even when you're talking about breakfast or like whatever it is. And I think at first I thought of this as a way to just make like fiction exciting. But the longer I know people in my life, like the longer my relationships, like friendships, my partnership like last, I'm like, oh, we're actually doing this. Like we're actually talking to each other and past each other, and talking about what's most dear to us, what makes us vulnerable, even when we're talking about like whether to take the bus or to walk or whatever it is.
That's true.
On that note,
Yes.
should we take some questions from the audience? This is when everyone's hands just fly up.
What was it like to revisit these stories? It seems it's taken on so much evolution since it was first published.
Emotional.
Emotional.
On Sunday, I took this book, and What's for Sale jumped out at me, and I was in a different space when I first wrote the novel and wrote the short story to where I am now, and seeing, man, like And you know, I have Laura to thank. I feel like I was even telling Laura back there, I was a completely different person. I was not, you know, even in my MFA program, I did not feel confident as a writer. I did not feel like my work belonged in the literary canon. I had no courage, or not courage. I had no idea I would have been here. And to have this full circle moment where here I am, you know, hearing our bios being read, and I'm reading what's for sale. Literally, the first thing I put down on the page, and somebody said, "Oh my God, you're amazing." It's a lot, and yeah, because of Laura, we are here. She helped us kick down doors that were closed to us. This was back in 2010. Sorry, I'm gonna get emotional. Yeah, we never existed. You know, I mean, we did have the household names. We did have the Toni Morrisons and Edwidge Danticat, but we never had Nicole Dennis-Benn. We never had Naima. We never had those. And here we are. And so I feel like it's Laura. She had these agents come in, editors come in, meet these writers, guys, and they sat with us because Laura had us in that space. And so full to Laura. So yeah, it's full circle.
Y'all don't make me start crying up
Yeah.
here.
Oh my goodness.
I feel similarly. I felt very emotional rereading Colds. I wrote it 10 years ago, which I can't believe we were talking about that. It was published in Quayle 9 years ago, and I had sold my first book, but it hadn't come out yet. And like Quayle was like a dream publication for me. Like it felt like so legit. And then I had submitted Cold a couple different places, and as soon as I got the notification, I withdrew it from the other places, and I was like, this is it. And then Laura did an event for a special issue of Quayle with Asterix, and I flew up from North Carolina to attend, to go to New York City. I'm from New York City. I'm from Brooklyn, but I was living in North Carolina at the time. And I remember, Angie Cruz and Nellie Rosario were there. And they were novelists who like I had read and who were like heroes to me, who were so warm and lovely to me. And I was like, I'm in the room, like with, with these writers I admire. And like similarly, like in the MFA, I didn't feel like I had, or that I was a part of writers that I wanted to be a part of, and felt connected to. And in that room, in the writer's room, I was like, oh, maybe this is what it will be like, and there'll be other people of color who are doing this work and who will like be peers but also be mentors. And it was just like, it was great. I was looking at the pictures, my godfather came, it was like a whole, it was awesome.
You could feel the love in the room.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Somewhat related to that, I think for a lot of people in this room, I've heard people talking about like Quayle, like workshops and different stuff like that. I think you've been critical in helping people believe in their talent. So I want to ask you directly, Laura, like, what does that mean to you, or like what motivates you to do that, to kind of step into people's lives and say, hey, your work is actually really good and you should believe in it and you should work on it?
Good question. I'm essentially giving back a bit of what June gave to me when I was a student in her classroom, where she told me that the story was worth the investment of my time. She didn't tell me that it was done with the first draft. She marked it up, but I was glad she did that because she showed me what was needed to bring a work to completion, draft after draft after draft. And then when it was done, she said, now this is a story. So I learned so much from that process, and she shared my work with other writers in her circle. Now, did I know those other writers consisted of Toni Morrison and Toni K. Bombera? No, and I'm glad I didn't, because I didn't. Oh my goodness, I would not have been ready for that as an 18-year-old. But I'm just giving back some of what I was given, and I enjoy it, right? It's a passion, and I take it seriously. This role that I took on when I started Quayle is something that I do and give 200% to each and every time, you know. And I see the beauty and the magic in each of the pieces that I read. And then I try to do my part to ask the right questions so that that piece can then grow. Thank you.
So piggybacking on that answer, Laura, I'd love to know a little bit about how you approach editing and what questions you ask yourself first, what questions you ask of the story, how maybe your identity as a musician and a singer intersects with your identity as an editor.
Good question. I tend to read the piece a few times before I even start commenting upon it. And I look at what areas need to be shored up, which areas of the story or the narrative I need to research before I can even frame a question. I dig deep because I think that's my role, my responsibility as an editor. And I also keep Toni Morrison's definition of a good editor in mind. A good editor knows what not to touch, and they ask the right questions that the author would have asked if there had been the time. So those what if questions, those questions that can assist the artist with layering the piece, with seeing a character in a more nuanced way, all of that is a joy for me. I think that it makes my heart sing on a regular. Yeah. And when it comes to music, I have always lived in music. My parents were jazz enthusiasts, so I think I was singing along with Sarah Vaughan when I was in elementary school. And I think as I started performing, people would compare my voice to her contralto. But I would try to stylize it and come up with my own way of interpreting the song. Thanks for that question, Ben. Other questions?
We have time for one more.
I just want to ask about your routine in terms of writing, like from idea to like execution. In a sense, do you write every day, certain times a day? You know, how does it work in terms of just like getting it done?
Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I think mine has changed. I
Since
used
you
to
had children.
love, yeah,
It's changed.
yeah.
Both of you now have 2 children.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Two 4-year-olds. So I was an early morning writer. Still am to an extent if they're sleeping, and I could like sneak. But then I became a late night writer with children, mostly because at 9 p.m., which is a golden hour, the house is quiet finally, and I could, start working on a few chapters. And night writing to me, I'm surprised how much I love it, actually. But then I realized that my mornings are coming back to me because now they're sleeping in now to like around 8-ish a little bit. So I get that nice little window from 6 a.m. maybe 5:30. It used to be 4 a.m. But it's not perfect. What I'm trying to say to you, it depends on the mood. It depends on our children's if they're awake or not. But the most consistency happens during school hour, which is perfect. And I just go with the flow. To be honest with you, it was hard at first, especially if you had a routine that you're used to, and then now all of a sudden you have to change that routine. And so it's really going with the flow and now understanding that, well, things are going to change. Maybe I might not write it's something I want to write one day. It's fine. At least scribble something down and then work on it the next day. So giving myself more grace lately. That's mostly what I've been doing.
Yeah, no, it's been similar. I'm not very precious about my writing routine. I have a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old. So when they are at school or daycare, that's that's the time. And I mean, my ideal before was like to wake up early, and before doing anything, like before brushing teeth, before changing clothes, looking at my phone, just like writing for a few hours when my mind is fresh and not distracted. But now, like with kids, like by 9 a.m. I'm like a wreck. Like, it's like I've like lived 3 lives. So honestly, like time is challenging, but more than that, it's like emotional energy and space. So just like trying to find ways to like open up that space, like get in the zone. This is such like a annoying answer, but like I feel like exercise or like some kind of like movement
Yes.
like helps me like reset and have clarity, like a walk or something just to reset, because if I'm frazzled then it doesn't work for me.
Has it come to an end?
Yes.
Wow.
Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Thank you all for being here. For those of the live stream, you can buy a copy of the book from the link in the description. If you're still with us here, we have a few copies left. And I say few quite literally. Well, plus one, we have 4 copies left. So, you should buy those in a second. Laura is going to be signing and personalizing where my coworker is waving. We will have you, not in this moment, but in a minute, we will have you line up, down, across the fiction aisle. Make sure to grab your belongings, because we grab those chairs once you're out of them. And have a great night.